All right,
And
here we go.
welcome
Everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome as you are all joining us today. My name is Carrie Henley. I'm the SVP of Digital and Alumni Strategy at Modern Elder Academy, and welcome. We're so delighted to have you here today for a conversation, a fireside chat with Chip Conley and Becca Levy on breaking the age code. We're so excited to have you here. We are quite interactive in our connections with each other, so be sure to turn on your camera. If you want to quickly go in the gallery view, you can kind of wave at each other. How many of you are here for the very first time, first MEA live event? Welcome, wonderful. It's terrific to have you here. How many of you are alumni of our MEA programs? Wonderful, great to see you. So I'm going to bring up Chip Conley to the stage here and let him kick everything off. But as we do that, we love to use the chat for questions. We use it a little bit for comments as well. Let's just have everybody pop in the chat. Where are you from? Where are you in the world right now? We have our alumni hail from 30 countries all over the world and often come at all different times of the day and the evening for our events. So we call this our chat waterfall flowing here. We may have you answer a question now and then as we go through the hour together. It's look at this blowing up, Munich and all of the United States and wow, British Columbia, Finland, Argentina, Canada. Becca, I hope you're enjoying Hawaii, London, all over the United States. This is fantastic. Wow. So if you have a question or an issue with your tech, you can always send a private chat to me or to Leslie. We're happy to help you with anything that you might need. Basic Zoom etiquette, try to keep your mute button on so that we have really clear audio so we can hear well. And when it's the time for questions, which we will have later today, you can use the reactions button on the bottom to raise your hand, or you can post a question in the chat. We'll manage both. So without further ado, let me bring up Chip and we will get this party started. Here you go.
Hey, everybody. Coming to you from Santa Fe, New Mexico. So I remember when I was a kid and I was a huge LA Lakers fan, and the Lakers were going to win the championship for a couple of years. And we had some tickets to the game, me and my dad, and I got to meet Wilt Chamberlain. And it was like Wilt Chamberlain, 7'1", and this giant. And he's somebody I loved playing basketball, and so I wanted to meet him. And I got to tell you that Becca Levy is my modern day, or my modern elder Wilt Chamberlain, because at MEA for the past 4 years and 4 months, we have been reciting Becca's research and waiting for her to write a book. And now she has a book. And it came out 2 days ago, and it's getting wildly positive reviews. And we are so honored, Becca, to have you join our Modern Elder Academy community globally for this conversation today.
Thank you, Chip. It's so great to join you. And yeah, I've been a big fan of all the work that you're doing in the Modern Elder Academy. So terrific to join everybody.
So let's start, why the heck did you study aging? You had so many different choices, and I can't say that, the psychological belief system of humans around aging was high on the list for a lot of your compadres and comadres that you were learning and going to, your graduate school and PhD with. So what was it about aging that actually interested you?
I actually came about an interest in aging somewhat accidentally. So my first job that I was offered after I graduated from college was working on a geriatric psychiatric unit. So I knew I really wanted to work in a mental health hospital, and the only position that was available was working with elders. And I at first didn't want to take the position. I thought it would be really depressing. I thought there was no way that I would enjoy it, but it was the only offer I had. So I decided to take it. And then I ended up just loving the job. I really enjoyed getting to know the team and the people who were recovering. And I really enjoyed the experience of seeing all the many factors, the biological, the psychological, the social, the cultural factors that can go into aging health. So that inspired me to want to learn more.
So and so you started learning more, you started doing your research. Talk about the earliest days of when you started to see this correlation between a person's perspective or belief system on aging and their health outcomes.
So that started when I was in graduate school and I had the opportunity to go to Japan. And my goal in going there, I received a fellowship from the National Science Foundation. And my goal was to try to understand why Japan has the longest lifespan in the world. And the first thing I noticed when I arrived in Tokyo was how differently it seemed like the older citizens were being treated from what I was used to seeing when I was at the time I was living in Boston. So I experienced or observed a lot of ageism. And I noticed immediately in Japan that there were many examples of older people being celebrated. I noticed on television that centenarians and super centenarians were treated like rock stars and celebrities on many different shows. They have a national holiday celebrating older people. And so I became really interested in whether it's possible that these ways that older people are integrated and celebrated, whether those beliefs could impact longevity and be one of the factors that's contributing to them having the longest lifespan. And that sparked a series of studies when I got back that showed evidence that actually does seem to be what is happening, that these age beliefs can have an impact on aging health and longevity.
So back to Japan for 1 second. I think the Japanese have culturally something about your 60th birthday is your second beginning. Is it Konriki or something like that? And people at age 60 feel like there's a new beginning happening. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that is correct. So they have many milestones and ways of celebrating different birthdays that have a lot of significance. And there's special gifts and special ways for families to come together around them.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so now let's take it to the next step, which was you then started to do a deeper dive into the correlation, and you got to the point where you actually were able to show that someone who shifts from a negative to a positive perspective or belief system or mindset on aging gains 7.5 years of additional life. Talk about the data behind that and just as you started to talk with your fellow academics about it, did people believe you? Because you were saying this is more life than if someone actually stopped smoking in midlife or started working out at midlife. This is actually has a better health effect. So please tell us how, is this real or is there data behind this? Come on.
Yeah. So after I got back from Japan, I had these ideas I really wanted to study. But I didn't know how do I go from understanding these nebulous cultural beliefs that actually can get under our skin? Like, how do I actually put that together? And so I searched for different methods that might allow me to see if there's science that could support that or examine whether there is science. And so what I came across was this town in Oxford, Ohio, in which a sociologist named Robert Atchley many years ago asked everybody who was 50 and older who lived in this town to describe their age beliefs. So he had collected this information and sort of put it aside. And I came across it and realized we could track those age beliefs of those people in the town to their survival because it had been collected many decades ago.
How did you even, wait, how did you even know? How did you know that Oxford, Ohio existed with this study?
Well, so there had been studies that had been written about this town,
okay.
And it had mainly been about their beliefs about retirement, but they hadn't yet collected it to any kind of biological or health or longevity measures. So, when I found it, I did some investigations and found that the government actually keeps track of everybody's lifespan. They have something called the National Death Index, and there's ways to actually connect that information to the people in the town. So by doing that, I was actually able to track each person in the town who reported their age beliefs decades ago, and then follow them over many decades to see how long they lived. And as you mentioned, what we found was that those who had taken in more positive age beliefs at a younger age showed this survival advantage on average of about 7.5 years over their peers who had taken in more negative age beliefs. And so, so we were actually able to track that connection, which was really an important step in trying to understand how this all works.
But aren't there just a bunch of, again, now we're going to get geeky for a second, but aren't there all these other factors that would actually also like someone just works out more or they're just, how are you able to get it down to just age belief as a singular variable such that there weren't a bunch of other things that were sort of polluting the data a little bit?
Right. So that's a good question. So in modeling, we're able to take into account all the other factors that could be contributing to longevity. So we're able to look to see whether above and beyond exercise, for example, above and beyond smoking and different factors, whether the age beliefs that they report, that alone contributes to the variation in longevity. And in addition, I've been able to go back and forth between different methods. So in some of our studies, we do more kind of clinical trials, which we can experimentally randomly assign people to different age belief conditions and then see whether that changes different kinds of health outcomes. We can follow people over time. And then also we can look at people cross-culturally. So that's something that I've really enjoyed doing, is looking at different cultures that have different types of age beliefs, and then look to see whether we see different kinds of health outcomes based on those beliefs. So by having different kinds of methods that kind of come together, that gives me more confidence that what we're studying is sort of a real finding.
So you've been able to sort of repeat the study, so to speak, from Oxford in other ways.
Exactly. Yes.
Great. Okay. So now let's get prescriptive for a moment. First of all, let's talk about you for a second. How has this research influenced how you live your life differently, or how you see your aging process?
Well, I think one piece is that it's made me very aware of all of these messages that I think I wasn't aware of before. So I think I've become a much more active monitor of some of the messages that I'm seeing in advertising and social media. And I think I've become much more aware of the absence of older people in different conversations that I think I wasn't noticing before. So I think that piece has definitely become much stronger in my own life. And then I think also, I'm also kind of looking for different ways to spark an age liberation movement, or sort of kind of go forward in trying to bring about some change.
What is an age liberation movement? So I'm lucky enough that I got a galley of your book. The book came out 2 days ago, so I don't actually have the final copy, but I got to read your galley, and you talked about an age liberation movement. What the heck is that?
So the age liberation movement is something that I think we're on the verge of starting. And it's parallel to other social movements that we've seen with other kind of groups that have wanted to increase their rights and equity in society. So it's a movement of people that are coming together that want to bring about a more age just society. And there are people who want to fight ageism, which we know has become a real problem in this country. And they also want to look for ways to increase inclusivity and equity of all ages, including older individuals.
So, okay, beautiful. So give us an example of a positive age belief practice. Like what would, if someone said, okay, I want Becca's book to be a self-help book. It's actually less of a self-help book. It's more of, although there's adequate information in there for everybody to understand how they can change their life based upon the point of view. But if you were to say, like, here are 2 or 3 practices that you might want to integrate in your life to help yourself move from maybe a negative or even a neutral perspective on aging to a positive, what would you recommend?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So in the book, Breaking the Age Code, I present about 14 evidence-based tools that people can start right away to try to shift from more negative age beliefs to more positive age beliefs, or strengthen the positive age beliefs. And one of the most powerful ones that I have found that I discuss is something called age belief journaling. And so we know that these age beliefs can operate without our awareness. But if we increase our awareness of how they're operating, I think that's really the first step to bring about change. And so age belief journaling, what this involves is, for 1 week, writing down every image of aging that you notice. So it could be in social media, it could be in streaming your favorite show on Netflix, it could be when you overhear a conversation in a coffee shop if somebody's talking about an older person. So anytime you hear a portrayal of an older person, write it down, and then also write down whether it's positive or negative. And if it's negative, take a moment and think, could this have been a different portrayal? Could there have been a way to present this older person in a way that maybe brought in some of their strengths? So if you watched a show and they have a cranky older principal, like could there have been a different principal that was presented? Could it have been a principal that was actually, generating meaning and offering wisdom to the students? So taking that moment to evaluate the images, and then the third part is actually to evaluate the absence of older people. So if you watch your favorite show and nobody seems to be over the age of 25, write that down, because we also know that the omission of people of a certain group can lead to marginalization, and it can make them feel not included in a conversation or in society. So I think by doing those three things of writing down when you notice an older person, if it's positive or negative, in the absence of an older person over a week, can be a really powerful process of becoming really aware of these messages.
But wouldn't that just become depressing? I mean, so let me ask, because it's
yes.
There's a lot of ageism out there. So what I hear you saying is you're a note taker, an observer, as we call it in MEA, a first-class noticer. And yet what you're noticing is something that is actually sort of depressing. So how do you then take it to the positive side?
Well, so I think when you start to notice some of the images, I think you will notice more positive images, because they're out there too. And I think they sometimes are in the background, but sometimes, there's somebody who we really admire who isn't necessarily forefront in a television show or in social media or an advertisement, but there often are these images or people in our own lives that we can take more notice of who are older. So I think that part of that process is becoming more active, noticing some of the positive images, but I think also noticing the negative images and questioning them, and noticing that there could be an alternative portrayal that draws on older people's strengths, I think can actually be a really good process of not taking those negative beliefs for granted, and really seeing that we can shift them. And that's something that we can do at any age. We know children as young as 3 have already taken in some of the messages of their culture, and those continue over time. So it's a process that at any age we can really become active curators, engagers in our culture and these messages.
So exactly, and talk about some of the research you did that showed that when you actually just gave maybe an adjective or two to someone who is older, that might be positive, like wise or thoughtful, as opposed to cranky or forgetful, that just even the words that you would use for them to somehow contemplate. Explain that part of it, and then how it affected their own sense of their age. You know what I'm talking about, because it's in your book.
Yes, I do. So we talked about earlier about the different methods that we use to try to understand how these cultural age beliefs can influence health outcomes. And one of the methods is experimental, and I think that's what you're referring to. So we have found that we can bring a laptop to somebody, and we can generate images of aging, and we actually use words that are presented at speeds that allow perception without awareness, which is so we flash words on a computer screen, and we have found that can activate the beliefs that we already have in our mind. So it's not that we're creating images, we are activating images that people have already taken in from the culture. But with that process, as you mentioned, if we activate a more positive image of aging, we can bring about a number of improvements in different kinds of outcomes. So we found, for example, that people have faster gait speed, that they have better balance, that their response to stress lowers if we activate and strengthen these positive age beliefs. We found that people have better ability to do a task where they're sitting and standing from a chair, so they have better control over some of their physical outcomes. We've also found, we had one study where we found that we could strengthen people's will to live even in these scenarios of imagine different kinds of health outcomes. So yes, so I think just strengthening those messages can be quite powerful.
It's amazing. I mean, this is what Modern Elder Academy is all about. I mean, give us your unvarnished perspective on MEA, with not having visited us yet. At some point, we're going to actually have you be a guest faculty member and teach, maybe in Santa Fe or in Baja. But I mean, why aren't there more MEAs out there? And what do you think MEA is doing that is helpful? And what could we do more of? Again, it's a white blank slate. You don't know too much.
Yes, yeah, and I love what you're doing. And I think that many of the ideas that you are putting into place are they sort of echo some of the important findings that we have been that has been coming up in the science. So I think some of the ideas that you're putting into place of finding purpose and taking advantage of sort of transitions and seeing midlife as a time to embrace and to bring about sort of these meaningful changes as a community, I think are, fantastic ideas that really come together with the findings. And yes, and I would love to, to join you. I know we almost did that right before the pandemic. We started planning it, and then the pandemic put an end to it. But yes, I would love to talk about that again and come visit.
So what's your thinking? Let's now move to sort of the social side of this and the public policy side of it. So why are there not more modern elder academies? And why is there not maybe a singular, the NAACP does an amazing job of historically of advocating for the rights of Black people from the African diaspora. AARP might do a good job at that. We won't get too deep into that one, but it's an organization that, as opposed to an association, does it feel a little bit like there's a lack of a infrastructure of all of these academics and nonprofits and other organizations like ours that could somehow come together and advocate for the idea that if your public health if we can help people live longer, happier lives, more so than even quitting smoking or starting exercising, why are there not PSA campaigns on bus stops that talk about, what are the unexpected pleasures of aging?
Yes, that's a great question. Something I've thought a lot about. And it's something actually that led to me Breaking the Age Code, writing this book, because I feel like we've got all of these strong findings that show that these age beliefs can impact health. And there's something that we can do about it so that we can improve the age beliefs and we can reduce ageism, both on an individual level and a structural level, and really bring about positive change. So it's something I've thought a lot about. And I think we need to get the message out. So I think hopefully, and I think there's signs that we're kind of at a precipice. I think that we are maybe getting close to a tipping point, that people are getting really angry about structural ageism and are feeling like they really want to bring about change in society. So I think there are signs that it's beginning, and it's great that Modern Elder Academy has these ideas and is part of that movement that we need to see. So but I think there hasn't been as much as there could be. And I think there's a number of reasons. One of the reasons I think is that ageism can operate without our awareness. It can operate implicitly. A lot of people don't know that it exists unless they're taught the tools, and then they start to notice it everywhere. I think also our society, as Mark Friedman has pointed out, has gone from being the most age integrated culture to the most age segregated culture. So I think there just isn't a lot of opportunities for the generations to get together and work on such an important issue. And I think also we know the World Health Organization has called ageism perhaps the most prevalent and most socially accepted form of prejudice that exists today. And I think to really shift people out of that, we really need to spark awareness and then really come together with all the generations to really work towards change.
You just mentioned Mark Friedman's name, and he is here on the call. Carrie, will you bring Mark to stage? And Mark doesn't know he's coming to stage right now. So Mark,
sure. Let me go grab him. Hold on
Mark,
a second.
are you open to coming on the stage for a second? So I'll just do a quick intro on Mark. Mark is the founder and CEO of encore.org and created the Purpose Prize, which is now part of AARP, and created Experience Corps, part of AARP. He's been sort of like he's like the farm club for ultimate major league baseball players when it comes to programs in the aging space. So Mark, I love the fact that both of you have your books behind you. I don't today. So tell us your perspective on that, Mark. Why does it feel like it's so disparate in terms of the community of people who are addressing aging beliefs and positive health outcomes around aging beliefs?
Well, first I wanted to show I've got my copy, but
there you go.
More than that, I ordered this copy the other day and it arrived promptly. And then the next day, another copy arrived because it turns out I'd ordered it months ago and forgotten. And so I'm so excited about the launch and this conversation already. And, actually, Chip, I'm not answering the question you just raised because I did want to ask Becca about this interplay between ageism and age segregation. And, it's interesting in studying ageism and age segregation. I was struck by how the growth of the retirement community movement, for example, was fueled by a retreat from ageism. So many older people around the country felt rejected. I think in 1956, Lewis Mumford said, at no point in any society had any group been so rejected as older people today. And he had just turned 60. And, I remember the opening day of Sun City reading about 100,000 older people showed up on the first day to essentially to get away from this kind of rejection. But then, in turn, all of these ways which we separated older people from other groups in society contributed to ageist attitudes, I think. And now that people are living longer and longer lives, how, as a younger person, can you have a positive view of later life when you have so little interaction with older people? How, as we become one of the most multi-generational societies in history, can we make the most of that when there is? So I'm really, you've talked so much and so eloquently about the role culture is playing. Could you say something about your view of how ageism and age segregation interact, and also any prescriptions that you've encountered that you think would help alleviate that problem?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And I know you're doing great work in this space. So yeah, an honor to have this conversation with you. And actually, I wrote this wonderful piece recently about shows to keep an eye on, and you mentioned Hacks, which I went out and watched and I loved. So thank you for that. But let's see. So yes, I do think there is definitely this interplay between ageism and age segregation. And I think, unfortunately, it goes back and forth. So I think ageism leads to greater age segregation, and then age segregation in turn increases the ageism. So unfortunately, I think there's this back and forth cycle that is really important to think about how to get out of. And I think the work that you're doing is great in that effort. So I think one thing that I have in the book that was sort of a personal thing that somebody had mentioned to me that I found is really helpful is to actually write down your 5 closest friends and then write down what age they are, and think about how, are they close in age? Are there a couple that are, a little bit further in age? And so when I did that exercise, I found that maybe all of them were within a couple of years of my own age. And that made me just aware that maybe I hadn't been working on sort of meaningful ties across generations. And I think it's something that we can actively think about. I mean, there's opportunities to come together around shared experiences of, joining a book club, joining a yoga group. It can be online, can be in person. I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to build those meaningful connections.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you.
Mark, anything else?
Well, you mentioned Hacks, and I wrote a piece in the Boston Globe on Monday that was a part of Joe Coughlin's new Longevity Hub series. And I have to say, after years and years of seeing things getting worse and worse on the ageism front, I've been heartened by Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga just won a big Grammy last week. Hacks won, beat out Ted Lasso for the best shows of the year. The Oscars were filled with, and it does feel like, at least in popular culture, there are images and storytelling that's moving us, I think, in a positive direction. I haven't seen that before. Will it be a continuing trend? And are you seeing some optimistic signs? You said you enjoyed Hacks, which I loved as well. Only Murders in the Building, Lupin. There were a whole set of series that were I think, portraying older people in different ways than we've seen.
Yes, I think there are a lot of positive messages, but actually I was on the plane the other day and they were showing, and I didn't watch it, but there's that show, I think a movie called Old, which is like a horror movie, which, I mean, it just looked terrible. It was portraying I hadn't seen it, so I probably shouldn't be commenting on it, but at least in the trailer looked like it was portraying aging as just this horrible thing that we should be really frightened of. That, so, I think there still are messages we need to improve, but I agree with you. I think there are some wonderful examples that are out there that hopefully are increasing in prevalence of great messages that we can draw on.
Thank you.
Thank
Mark, thanks for coming on stage.
My pleasure, and congratulations, Becca. I'm so excited about the launch of the book.
Oh, thank you. Great to see you, Mark.
Great.
So, Becca, I'm going to ask you a couple more questions that I saw in the chat, and now's the time. If you actually want to ask a question of Becca, you can go ahead and raise your hand by going to the reactions function at the bottom of your screen, and you just click on that, and you'll see the raise hand function, and then I will know that you are looking forward to asking something. Okay, so let's. Someone asked the question. At what age are you aged or you're old? I mean, do you have a sense of that? What is the definition of old at this point?
Yes, so that's a really good question. So there is no biomarker of age. So it's not like we can take any kind of test. We're not like trees that we have rings that increase each year. There's really no great measure of age biologically. And we also know that age can be due to, so only about 25% is due to our genes, and another 75%, are due to these social factors, including age beliefs. So I think in terms of, so I think part of that's part of the reason that how a culture defines aging and the meaning it gives age is so powerful, because I think it's really a fluid concept in our society that age can really shift based on the meaning it's given. So in our studies, we often ask people, how old do you feel? And because I think people can, have ages that are very differently, or when they feel older, when they feel like they're entering old age.
I think old age is 15 years older than me. And some people who've read my Wisdom Well post know that that's also my perspective on the speed limit. It's 15 miles per hour higher than what I'm driving right now. But be careful. So let me ask you one more question, and then we'll go to the audience. So, or to the audience, to those who are watching who've raised their hands. So raise your hand if you want to ask a question, if I'm not asking your question right now. So what's the relationship between aging beliefs and fear of death? Do you know anything about that? I mean, is there, I know Dr. Laura Carstenson's work from Stanford has shown that when people have a sense of less time ahead of them, they actually get happier. And this is unrelated to the U curve of happiness, but it's more related to just a sense of like you're spending more time in the moment and less time worrying about the future. But what is the correlation, if there is any, between someone's positive age beliefs and their perspective on the fact that they're going to die?
So this is interesting. So I have noticed that in cultures or subcultures that have more age positive beliefs, that there tends to be a greater acceptance of death, or feeling like death is part of the natural life cycle, and there's less of resistance and anxiety about death. So I think, and there's also some research that suggests that greater anxiety about death, there's a theory called terror management related to death anxiety. And there is some research that shows that people who have greater death anxiety do have more negative age beliefs, have more anxiety about and fear of getting older. So I think there is some support that the age positive movement, which has started in our country, and I think we talked about the other day about a death over dinner, and there's different movements to increase the acceptance and reduce the stigmatization around conversations around death. I think that is actually a piece that could contribute to greater acceptance of later life and celebration of later life.
Beautiful, thank you. All right, let's start with Dr. Kelly. Dr. Kelly, what's your question for Dr. Becca?
Well, Becca, first of all, I just want to congratulate you on your book and say how much I appreciate your data-driven insights. We know there's a lot of great information out there, but really we need the data to support evidence-based movements, right? So I'm just curious, we know it takes 2 years to publish a study, right? So is there anything new and exciting that we should watch for that is coming out in community-based interventions that are shifting the beliefs of the negative beliefs? We know a lot from our laboratory-based interventions, but what about community-based interventions? And Chip, you are doing a community-based intervention. MEA is as Becca said, is doing a great job of offering this to the public. So what's in the pipeline?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and and thank you for your comments. And I appreciate your liking data behind our findings. So it's that I agree that I think it is really important to have the science that comes together with the big ideas. And so yes, I think some of the big things that are coming out now are moving from, so as I talked about, we do have these experimental findings that tend to be really imitations of things that are happening in culture and tend to be in a very controlled environment. It allows us to pull apart, that it is actually age beliefs that are making the difference, but it doesn't follow people over time in a sustained way. So I think that is a really important step forward, is to start to conduct these field studies that are looking at these sustained changes that bring about sustained improvements in age beliefs and health. And yes, and I think Modern Elder Academy is a great place to look for some of those sort of community-based sustained findings.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you, Kelly. Let's go to Tuck. Tuck, when are you getting yourself down to Baja?
I'll be there in a minute. So I really appreciate you, Chip, and Becca for this and all your work, Becca. I'm particularly interested in any data that you have of the benefits of having younger people live in senior living communities, because I feel like there needs to be a prison break in these sort of age-restricted facilities behind walls and gates. I have to say one more thing, that I heard a wonderful quote by Stephen Colbert the other night. He said, "Younger people, the jumper cables to older individuals." But have you found any data in that, or?
So there is definitely there's definitely research that shows that intergenerational contact is a great way to improve age beliefs, both of the younger people and the older people, and particularly when they come together in shared meaningful activities. And living together gives many opportunities for those shared meaningful activities. So there is some research that's been looking at different cultures that have more intergenerational contacts and how that can improve, age beliefs and different kinds of health outcomes. And there have been some small scale interventions where people are put in different types of living situations that seem to have some positive benefits. So I think there has been some evidence that strongly supports what you're talking about, but I do think we need a lot more too. I think it's just beginning to be put out there to really understand all the benefits.
Thanks.
Great.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Tuck. Let's go to Paula from the New Mexico New Organization. Paula's based here in New Mexico and is an MEA alum.
Yes, thank you. Becca, thank you. I look forward to reading your book, and MEA, thank you again for another wonderful workshop. I wanted to ask, because it's a new nonprofit called Mexico New, and New stands for New Elder World. So it's all about engaging, trying to set up an easy way to engage people 50 to 70 plus in communities and keep us active and volunteering, working, learning events. We send a lot of people to MEA. So what I'm finding though is, and we're working with the state agencies and city senior affairs, the AAAs, the Area Agency on Aging. And I really learned a lot about that aging network, what they call the aging network. And what I wonder is, did you or have you run into that and given a lot of your data or interviewed a lot of the people that are in that, starting with the federal government, the Older Americans Act? And did you run into any of the people that hold the positions in the aging network?
Sorry, are you asking about like people in sort of policy positions? Yes. Related to? So actually, it is something that I have sort of made a shift in my own work. So most of my work has been, as a scientist and as a teacher. And so recently I have become really interested also in sort of the policy arena and trying to figure out who the power brokers who are out there.
Yep.
One of the activities I did in trying to go that direction is I started to work a little bit with the World Health Organization. So they've got a campaign to combat ageism that they recently launched. And I also connected this health economic analysis, because I was told that one way to reach out to some of the people that you're talking about in these policy positions was to try to come up with some financial, bottom line, this is how you can benefit financially if we make changes in policy that improve age beliefs and reduce ageism. And so we conducted this economic analysis, and we were able to identify the cost savings or how much it costs to have ageism in our country for people 16 over 1 year for everyone in the United States, and we looked at the 8 most expensive health conditions, and we found that the cost was about $63 billion. And so if we could reduce ageism, that's a space for savings. So it is something that I've started to really think about, and I think is really important if we want to bring about sort of top-down changes, which I think is going to be crucial in bringing about a more age-just society.
Yeah, the Older Americans Act, and I forget the federal agency, I have it in my notes. They are about to start listening sessions. So I should say about means probably in the next year. But they're about to start listening sessions. We'd be glad with, CHIP has been a huge, and the Chip Conley Foundation actually has been a huge support of New Mexico New. And I'd be glad to say New Mexico could be first. We would help. There is a lot of very proactive people that run agencies in New Mexico. Be glad to introduce you.
That sounds great. That would be a lovely place to get the movement sparked and going.
Yep.
Beautiful. Thank you, Paula.
Yeah, thank you.
There's a couple questions in the chat that I want to go to, and then we're going to go to Catherine after that. So there's been some questions about purpose. There's a question from Eduardo Bursino, who is the protege of Carol Dweck and has a book coming out in the next year or so. Are you aware of interventions that have helped people in later life develop or strengthen a sense of purpose? And what has that done to their age beliefs and their health outcomes? Now, also, I think Pat Whitty asked a question like that as well. And Dr. Phil Pizzo at Stanford has shown that purpose, wellness, and community are the things that are the most foundationally important to people after age 50. We also have Richard Leiter here. And if Richard, let's see if he's open to coming on stage, because he's on our guest faculty and has written a book about the power of purpose. But what's your perspective first, Becca, about how purpose is a very relevant piece of the process of aging?
Yes, so I definitely agree that purpose is really important, and I think that is a crucial part to successful aging is finding purpose, in later life, and finding ways to be generative and contribute to society. And so in our research, I've actually looked at purpose as being one of the prime mechanisms of how it is that these age beliefs can contribute to health and longevity. So in that study that I talked about earlier, looking at everybody in the town of Oxford, Ohio, we tried to look at what the mechanism was. And we found that those who had more positive age beliefs in turn had a higher sense of purpose in later life. And that seemed to be part of the reason that they had better survival. So I think it is a key piece of why positive age beliefs can contribute to these health benefits.
Beautiful. Richard, you are one of the most, you're Papa Purpose. Tell us a little bit about your perspective on purpose and aging.
They call me the Pope of Purpose for whatever that. But
Yeah.
the point is, I think, Becca, by the way, I have already read it. I got it. So thank you for the work. I can't add a whole lot to that other than I think Chip and with Modern Elder Academy and the other people online here, what we're talking about is choice, the will to live. And whether it's Viktor Frankl in a concentration camp or somebody who has got an age adversity type of thing, choosing makes all the difference in the world. It's the intention and the practice of choosing to get up in the morning with something beyond yourself. And so I think the one thing about purpose that I could add here is that it's always beyond self. It's always about how you're growing or giving or contributing some way beyond yourself, not just for your own self-interest.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Richard, by the way, is going to be teaching, co-leading a mastery week with me in November at MEA in Baja. And he is one of our guest faculty member on our Designing a Purposeful Path to Work online 8-week online course that starts June 4th. So you can see those on the MEA Modern Elder Academy website. Catherine, let's go to you.
So hello. Becca, I'm a sociologist, so really appreciate that some of this material came from sociology. And before I specifically ask the question, I just want to show that, yes, I care very much about, I can't show you, creating a healthy world. My book is Creative Social Change, Leadership for a Healthy World. But I want to ask about something that everybody's been criticizing, which is age-specific communities in the form of CCC. I can't even say. I have COVID right now, by the way, so if I'm stumbling, my brain's a little bit addled. But I've been really interested within the age-specific communities in the difference between, there seems to be 3 mindsets. One is like what people spoke about, the prison and caretaker. It's like find a place to put your mom away. Okay, that's one mindset. Another is, we'll give you the best luxury cruise style life. It's like luxury. There's nothing about purpose for other people. But then there is a third, which is in some of the different spiritual communities. I know of Quaker communities, mostly on the East Coast, and one that's forming on the West Coast that's Quaker Buddhist influenced. And it really feels like, and I am tentatively choosing to live that. But if I had a choice to be in a functioning community that had all ages, I certainly would consider that. But given the way the society is, personally, I'm actually really concerned about being old, alone, and having to care, say, for my husband, if he were to have a big problem, or him having to care for me. So I think it's a real thing, and I'm not sure that all of the age-specific communities have the same mindset. I think that some of them do have the intent of fostering purpose.
Yep. So let's see what Becca has to say about that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, I hope you feel better. You're not alone. So many people seem to have COVID right now. So yes, I think the way that you put it is quite lovely about the different mindsets. So, and thinking about bringing the generations together. And I think there can be an age specific or a community that brings older people together that can do great things. But as you said, there's also the risk that it's going to be a segregated society, a group that's not integrated and not given opportunities to be integrated as much as they would like to. So I think that's a really important observation. And I know, Chip, you mentioned you're putting together these great communities that fit into that.
We have regenerative communities instead of retirement communities. They're regenerative communities, and you can read more about it on the MEA website. Meant to be intergenerational, meant to regenerate the soil with farming or ranching, the soul, purpose, and the community and the locale. So it breaks down the barrier between the people who are living there and the broader community. So thank you for that great question. Let's keep going to Matt. We have lots of questions. Manuel.
Hello. I'm a financial advisor. And one of the questions that I would have is there's a bias, I think, in terms of the way people think about aging, whether they have money or not. And my question to you is, if you explored this relationship between income, savings, and view of people in retirement, or kind of their view of aging, and whether there was any kind of selection bias in the data when you inquire maybe to people that would have certain accumulated wealth. I don't know if you can talk about the relationship between having the means to live a long old age and not having them.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And you're definitely right that finances and having being able to have the financial support to live a meaningful later life is really crucial. And I think also just getting rid of all of the poverty that exists in later life is a crucial part of some of what I've seen people fight for with the age liberation movement ideas. In our research, we have found, we do ask people about their financial means, and we have found that people of different means show the same pattern. So we do find that people who have lower income and higher income show similar patterns of these age beliefs having an impact on health. But given that, and I think part of that is sort of the science of we all have the equal opportunity to be exposed to some of the ageist messages and some of the positive messages. But I think that, what you're saying is crucial. I think that having the financial resources is a really important part of being able to, enjoy later life and have a meaningful experience as we get older.
I think it's also part of the reason, Manuel, that people are working longer. It's hard to, as John Chauvin, an economist at Stanford, said, you can't finance a 30-year retirement with a 40-year career. And there's a growing number of people who say, I don't want to retire by choice or necessity. So let's go to Warren. Warren, it's great to see you. Been a while.
Hi, Chip. Good to see you. And Becca, thank you for the great session. I was curious, early on, you talked about living longer with a positive mindset towards aging. Does the data talk about how well you lived during those extra 7 years? Because my interest is in living well, not necessarily in living long. Thank
yes,
you.
Exactly. So, right. So in our studies, we do look at sort of mental health and well-being as being, important outcomes of longevity or later life health. So yes, you're definitely right that ideally we'll have meaningful life and good years, added years with better good years. So that is something that we look at, is quality, that goes hand in hand with some of the added years that we may gain from improving our age beliefs.
Thank you.
We also know, Warren, about the U curve of happiness. For those who don't know it, let me explain it for a minute. Around 47 or 48 years old, on average, your mileage may vary, people hit a bottom in terms of their life satisfaction. And this has been shown across almost all cultures. And then people get happier in their 50s than their 40s, 60s than 50s, 70s than 60s, and even women in their 80s are happier than they are in their 70s. So that's, I think, another indicator of saying, okay, that research is pretty comprehensive. And it does show that, are they living a better life? Well, if they seem to have greater life satisfaction, there might be a correlation between a better life and life satisfaction, which does suggest that as people are living longer, they can actually have a happier life. So let's go to Diane.
I just ordered your book because I forgot when I signed up for this to pre-order it. So hopefully it'll be here tomorrow, and I really will appreciate reading it. I've been looking at aging. I actually joined AARP when I was 25. I lied about my age just so I could understand what they were doing, how they were thinking. I thought I was going to go into aging policy. I created a program that I thought would work, which was around bartering, and because we always talk about all the high income and the low income, and it's like, well, what about the middle income? And talked about creating a bartering system that, well, I know how to make a cake, but I need somebody to drive me to the doctor's office. So some type of bartering system that we attempted to experiment with just a little bit. We couldn't get scale, but I've always thought about the segmentation of human beings. So not just sort of as we age, but as we think about, people are motivated by the basic demographics, but they're also motivated by their beliefs and sort of their health state. And I don't know if some of your research has attempted to sort of take away that blunt instrument of how we look at aging collectively, but how we also then think about some of the common things that we have, and then think about the unique things across some of those segments. And I like to also think about individually that we first start as rule breakers, and then we become the rule makers. So on an individual level, that begin to break the mold of what does it look like. I'm 65, this is what it looks like. And that's what I tell people.
So Diane, I'm going to have to cut you off just for timing, but thank you. I'm not exactly sure what's the best piece of that. I'm going to try to answer part of that and say, yes, middle class people who are older often are forgotten. It is, the rich have their, luxury spa kind of wellness, retirement communities, and the poor have, government sponsored programs, and then whole middle class. The senior living community industry knows this. They are very clear on this. And it's part of the reason with our regenerative communities, we're trying to actually do something that is across various different income levels and wealth levels. Any thoughts on that, Becca, or do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, so I think you commented very eloquently about that. Yes.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
Let's go to Shavanter. Shavanter, when are we seeing you in Baja?
Well, I'm hoping very soon.
Okay, good.
We've been in this journey for quite a while, from when you participated in my conference at Omega for Be the Vision many years ago. And I've had many great conversations with Elizabeth Lesser, who adores you and the work that you're doing.
What's your question for Becca? It's great to see you.
So because I come from a background of nonprofit and working at institutions like the Omega Institute, which are multi-generational, but also have a very strong Indigenous component to the structure of the organization. And so I'm curious, from a data perspective, has there been research done now looking at the correlations between the Indigenous and where we are as elders now, and tapping into this modern elder, the wisdom keeper components that are showing up supportive of what has existed for forever in many of these?
Let's see what Becca has to say about that.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And there were, that was something that I was able to explore a little bit in the book. So for example, the Indigenous community in Australia, we looked at songline community of the Indigenous community, and that's actually a wonderful example of elders who have a very strong role in passing along this wonderful information to the community. And that's one of the reasons they've become this very long, vibrant community of with an oral tradition that's been led by the elders. So I think that's a really interesting, important question: is how can we learn from what some people have already gotten right within certain cultures? I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from those groups.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Lynn.
Just briefly, Becca, I remember Hans Rosling used to say, the Western view of the developing world is about 20 years old. Their perceptions are about 20 years old. And so I'm wondering, does that hold true about our perceptions of what actual wealth, wellness, and longevity look like today versus, we're thinking of what our grandfathers and grandmothers experienced? Is there just a perception problem?
Well, yes. So, I think we know that the older community is changing with every decade. So there's sort of a lot of dynamic changes. I think, we know though that these age beliefs, unfortunately, we take them in at such a young age. We take them in as young as age 3, and then they're reinforced over time. So I think, and often they're reinforced before they become, self-relevant. So we have no reason to question them. So I think those cultural ideas we bring with us as we get older. So there's not, in that way, there's not as much change as one might like to see. But on the other hand, we do know that there are tools that we can take on to shift the age beliefs and make them more positive.
Beautiful. Bobby, you have time for a single line of a question, just one sentence.
Okay. I work at the Buck Institute for Research on Aging, deep in the science of aging, wondering what the collaboration is between what you're doing and the actual science, because we talk a lot about health span and longevity, and that's all part of this. So I'm just wondering, how's that?
Yes, so right. So most of my time is spent on research and thinking about the science behind some of these ideas. So yes, that's something that I'm very interested in, is how to bridge some of the cultural ideas and some of the science.
If someone wanted to get a hold of you without your email address, and they wanted to, like, for example, the Buck wanted to collaborate with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
So I just put up a new website that people can contact me through that. And it's my name, becca-levy.com. So that has information on how to get in touch with me and find out more about the research we're doing and this new book that's just come out.
Oh no, you've sold out. You now have your own website, Becca. Who knew? Becca, I love you. I just wanted to tell you, I really appreciate the work you do. It is so meaningful to so many people way beyond the MEA community. And I'm hoping with your book, it's going to actually create a ripple of impact, an ROI in a societal way, because it is time for us to have PSAs at bus stops that say, "Ooh, getting old is great." So thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here, and I'll reach out to you in the future about, when we'll have you in a workshop.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure to talk with you. I'm I'm having a lot of admiration for all the wonderful work you're doing, and great to be with everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, everybody. So the chat had lots of links and all sorts of stuff in there. We're going to be sending the recording of today's session to you a little bit later today with some of the links to get Becca's book and her website and our upcoming purpose course. All that will be available for you. So keep an eye out for that. And thank you for coming. If this is your first time, so good to have you. For our regulars, so good to have you. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you so much, Becca, and congratulations on the book.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Becca. See you, everybody, later. And see some of you alums at the reunion in San Francisco a week from now.
Bye, everybody.